Members, let's continue. Are you ready, Secretary? It's Tanya. Thank you, Chairman. I want to continue with the questions on identifications. Can we complete part 2 today? And can we complete part 2 first? I want to start with part 3. All right, and I understand that. Mr. Lai said that under paragraph 2.6, they said that there will be follow-up action after identification. So it's 2 months. I would like to know how schools and teachers do this. They have a measurement table for primary students, but what about those who are senior students? I know you can provide the checklist, but what about the guidance, guidelines for teachers and schools, so that early identification can be done? 22.6 C and D. Mr. Lai, in junior primary grades, this is more difficult because we have to first find out learning problems. But after P1, with some tests already taken, examination taken, and teachers will know certain students are not doing well. Those with dyslexia problems can be identified, and also their problems, emotional problems. If the student is not attentive, so trained teachers would have no difficulty in identifying the student as somewhat different from other classmates. And we have provided training in SEN, and we will concentrate on the special attributes of SEN students and teachers who have received the training. If they have attended some thematic training or the advanced training program, would know how to do this. And also with students with training can also help other students to identify them, and then the students can be referred to educational psychologists for further assessment. I want to ask a question about 2.5. It's about the figures there. I'm talking about those belonging to 31.8% who are diagnosed at a later stage.
Well, how many of them were not identified early? Because there may be new students or the problem surfaced later. Have you done any statistics to find out the number of cases with delayed identification resulting in a delayed provision of services? Assessment done for senior primaries are cases of emotional difficulties. There are very famous schools and not so famous schools. How do you identify the students? Or pre-primary 1 students will have to participate in the EII program. We see that the figure is steady. About a quarter of primary 1 students are those with questionnaires filled in for them. What about grade A schools? They all achieve 99.9. How do you identify that those with 97 points are with or without problems? In the EII and the observation checklist, we cover areas of basic performance academically and on behavioral as well as emotional areas. We don't look at the academic score. The observation list applies to all P1 students. So students with special learning difficulties can be identified using the checklist. There are some students who are in primary 2 who are quite good, and students in an international school and P2 they still don't know what they're doing. It doesn't mean that the one in international school has learning difficulties. How do you differentiate the different cases? This report covers general cases. There are many different types of schools. Of course, it's best to go to the best schools, but you may not get such information. For a general school, you may be able to identify the cases, but not so for very good schools. I think the chairman is not really referring to public or subsidized or non-subsidized schools. Well, for the observation checklist, we have P1, P2, and another one for P6. What about DBS? Well, for international schools, they have their own curriculum. We leave it to the school, so you don't care about them. I ask this question because under the ordinance, all children will have equal opportunity and access to education. If they go to a school that is not so good, it doesn't mean that they are not so good. What do you do with them? I understand. They can also make use of the observation checklist provided by the Education Bureau. We'll leave it to the school to decide how they're going to deal with it. That means you won't involve yourself with it. 2.6c covers just subsidized schools or all schools in Hong Kong. Sorry, I'm learning from you, Chairman. I would like to ask about 2.8b. I would like to know more about the Special Education Management Information System. When will the information about the student appear in the system? When they proceed to secondary school or as soon as they are identified as SEN students? What kind of information is covered? Will there be any updating? Will there be information about progress when they meet with a psychologist or psychiatrists? This is the Special Education Management Information Systems, SEMIS, S-E-M-I-S. This covers subsidized primary secondary school students. When they go to primary 1 with the consent of parents, schools will input the information into the system. We will then provide resources to schools. Apart from basic information of the student and the school, there will also be information about the SEN type. If the degree is known, it will be made available. The school will every year update the academic performance of core subjects so that we can monitor progress. With the consent of parents, information will be transferred to the secondary school within the system. It covers students in special schools. So we have student information of subsidized primary, secondary, and special schools. If they receive additional support from, say, the hospital authority, can they have access to the information or update the information? Information will be given to the Education Bureau preschool, which will then be given to the school, and it's a hard copy. They have their own system, but it is not connected. We will mainly look at the type of SEN and the degree of difficulties, if any. Education psychologists will conduct a detailed assessment, the information of which will also be input into the system. Can you give us a template? So that we'll know about what kind of information there is. In part 3, we talk about funding allocation. So I would like to have more specific information to base my questions on. Yes, we will choose suitable information to provide to you. The director for audit said that about 21,000 students are from SEN students in primary school, about 21,000 in secondary school. And the amount of resources will be increased to $1.4 billion. Do you think that is sufficient for SEN students? It is difficult to say whether it is enough or not. Can I use this word, effective? You are a secretary for education. There are 42,000 SEN students, 7.8% of total student population. You will increase funding to $1.4 billion. Do you think that it is effective for SEN students? They may be SEN students, but they will be able to learn and grow in an ordinary school. That's what integrated education is about. There is resources. However, because of the special education needs, we will provide more resources for better care, to overcome learning difficulties so that they can progress. Hong Kong is affluent. We have $13.8 billion surplus. You are the Secretary for Education. You give $400 million additional resources to 42,000 SEN students.
Active and assistant to upgrade students with SEN requirement.
主席就
Well, currently the expenditure is about $1.7 billion. You can't really compare it out of the hundreds of billions of dollars of service. We don't just look at the $1.7 billion. there is a portion of total expenditure to education spent on that as well. So there is additional resources. There are better ways to spend the resources to help them. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I have to ask the question because I think that the report tells us that 42,000 students will need help. I'm sure you would very much want to ask the question. In paragraph 2.12, I don't really understand about the flow, C and D. There is the school-based educational psychology service, Gen 2. It says that after a referral is received, the school-based educational psychologist will arrange for assessment as soon as possible. Usually it will be completed within 6 months. There will be individual assessment for each student. The educational psychologist will, in the post-assessment meeting, explain to school and parents the result of the assessment. C says that EPs should provide parents with an assessment summary. Usually it will be issued within 3 months. I would like to first ask about C. When does the 3 months start to count? From after the assessment, when the summary is given. Mr. Lai? Please also answer about B as well. When the educational psychologist has received the case and an assessment is done, of course, information will be given to the parents as soon as possible. That is called an assessment summary. Well, it's usually within 3 months when the summary is given to the parent, and within that time, a post-assessment meeting will take place. Teachers and the parents will meet. If it is found that major recommendations or problems identified will have to be revised in the summary, the revised summary may not be readily available to parents. Usually it's 3 months after the assessment when the summary is given to parents. Would you like to get a case example? Would that be appropriate? Can you give me maybe a sample? Yes. There is also about a copy of the report. D. I would like to ask Mr. Lai to explain. It says that for every referral given assessment, a copy will be issued. It will be given to normally within 3 months. So it's around the same time that it's given to schools and parents. Well, the post-assessment meeting is part of the assessment. Further discussion will take place with teachers and further information is obtained from parents. So assessment is not just about assessing the intellectual ability of the student. So the summary will be given to parents within 3 months. And there is also an assessment report. The report will be written in English. It covers information obtained from discussions and interviews with specialists and experts. I did not know when the 3 months start to count. My understanding is that there is first an assessment, then there will be a post-assessment meeting, there will be interviews with school staff and parents, And roughly within 3 months after assessment, the summary will be given to parents and there may be revision. Meeting with parents is part of an assessment. So it's starting from that time. Within 3 months there will be assessment report given and a copy will be given to the school. Can you give me a sample of C and D? It also says in the audit report about when the report is released. The audit notes that that there is a computer system. Is it in relation to semis, the same, the one and the same? A date of referral will be recorded. Date of assessment will also be recorded as well. But the date of meeting, submission of summary and report is not recorded in the system. How can you ensure that the information is given to parents, schools in due course for follow-up? Well, the date of the post-assessment meeting is not within the control of the EP. Arrangements will have to be made with stakeholders. Sometimes it will take more than 3 months if parents are not available. We have taken on board the recommendations of the audit. We are looking into whether it brings extra burden to schools and EPs. We in principle accept the recommendations. We're working on actual operation. It's just that you say you accept. Yes, we have accepted it. The report, the minutes will be verbatim. How can you ensure that information, that all this take place in due course? The computer system is very important. You only put in the date, or you input the report or the gist of it into the system. There are supervisors, and there is also a supervisor at schools. We fully understand your concern as to when the summary and the reports are released.
So
they do have the expert knowledge for that, and our colleagues will go to the school to examine and oversee the process. If we see something wrong, we will inform the staff. Now, sometimes there may be a delay, say the EP has to deal with an urgent case of suicide, or sometimes the EP may fall sick. Now, will there be the detailed report in the SEMIS? Will you add that? Now, the report and the summary varies with the type and with the student. So on whether it can be scanned, we can consider that to see whether it's useful. It's not just something we can fill in with a tick. The content may vary. on whether we put in a copy, we will consider that. Well, it's also a matter of privacy. In LegCo, we can apply a black mark, but you can't do that on the internet. Now, this is not publicly published information. Now, this may be for restricted circulation. Now, some private doctors get the patient's information from the public healthcare system. So I'm just asking, will you provide more comprehensive information in the system so that the student's history can be kept for better care of him? You can continue to ask the questions. We can extend the meeting if necessary. Now, you were on 2.14. I'm now at 2.15. Now, we asked about Part A, that is the pilot scheme on on-site preschool rehabilitation services. Now, next, the information needs of SEM parents when choosing schools. Now, the administration said that they will try to do that, having heard from members. Now, there is a committee on cooperation between family and schools. Now, what's the function of that committee? Perhaps I can ask the permanent secretary to reply. The committee has many functions on supplying information to parents. Now, when kindergarten schools graduate to primary school, or when the primary school students graduate to secondary school, there is a allocation arrangement, and the parents are provided with information on the primary school or secondary schools. And of course, the parents can also go on the internet for information. And this committee provides a guide to schools, and it's quite popular with the parents. And we also discuss with the committee on whether there can be certain fields for schools to provide information on integrated education, and the committee has agreed. And in the guides to be disseminated in 2018, there will be such information. So I now understand. Now 2.22b. Now the school will make a self-assessment, and in November it will upload the information. Now, what information will be included in this self-assessment, or is it entirely up to the school? Now, the self-assessment is not limited to SEM policy, but with other policies also. Now, we have an operation guide on integrated education, and this includes how the schools can provide information to parents on integrated education, and we do provide samples for the schools to follow. Now, on Chapter 3, there is a part on performance management, and there is something there similar to a self-assessment form. Now, of course, there the items are much more detailed. Now, this operation guide on whole school participation in integrated education. Now, how does that compare with the self-assessment form? Now, in the guide, there are many appendices for the schools to follow, and that includes samples on how to on the various types of support for the students. The samples are in the operation guide, yes. Now, on paragraph 3.25 says that this operation guide includes the self-assessment form. Now, I think this is an interesting part in part 3, in paragraph 3. Now, the teachers and the social workers provide certain support, and then there's this form. Now, in B, it says there are two types of forms. The self-assessment report form to be filled in by the school on the student's progress, yes. And then there's the progress of the student and the performance of the student. And the Audit Commission found that this is self-assessment. So mostly the school says that it's satisfied with the performance on the progress, but it's not. But there's little improvement in performance. Now, so since this self-assessment report has to build in, would the information in the report be included in the website? Or according to the operation guide, it has to be updated to the school website? Can you explain the procedure now as in note 9? Perhaps Mrs. Wong can explain. Now, under the school-based management policy, we rely on the school's self-assessment framework. That's based on the school's development needs, and the assessment has to be put on the website. So the school puts on the website such information based on its development needs, and this is part of the guideline. Now, this is the part of the framework. And then on Chapter 3, it says that with the implementation of integrated education, we have some forms that they have to fill in, and there are different areas in the forms. the school has to take certain items to assess itself on certain more detailed items. Now, the audit so we see that there is room for indicators that we provide. So we say that we will improve our approach. Now, at the lower level, concerning the students, on the students' performance, the audit commissioner made the point that the school is satisfied with the implementation of the integrated education, but student performance, they think, is not that good. So we think we can go deeper in our efforts. Perhaps Dr. Lau can explain on student learning, on the learning of SEN students. Now, on the assessment of students, how can we improve? Dr. Lau? Now, on student performance, right now the self-assessment by schools is on the broad directions. For instance, the academic results, the writing ability, the reading ability. Now, this is an assessment of whether the progress of the student at the end of the school year is satisfactory or whatever. Now, but we train the students on certain capabilities like reading comprehension and how to control their emotions. So the students' concrete performance may not be reflected properly. So in future, we hope that the indicators will be more specific and concrete because the student faces certain difficulties. We need to assess whether progress has been made on the student's performance in specific performance. Now, in that management information system, there should be more information on the self-assessment. Now, social behavior, whether students follow school rules, relationship with teachers, self-confidence, learning performance, reading ability, writing ability, all these are covered. And learning attitude and motivation, whether there is enough self-motivations. So I don't know whether Dr. Lau wishes to further improve on this form. Now in paragraph 2.22 there is a self-assessment mechanism. This has to be put on the internet for the parents' reference. And Chapter 3, there is a self-assessment on the student performance, on the and also on the school's general moral education. Now, now is it the so what is the school supposed to do in this regard? Mr. Lai first. A simple response on special education. Every school has a dedicated staff member. Now, so we look at the information that has been input into the system, and we will discuss with the school every year when we visit the school, and now perhaps I can follow this up on chapter 3. Perhaps Kenneth Leung has a question. Chairman, the Secretary, anything to add? Dr. Lau wishes to respond. On the member's question, now if we further improve on the specific items, say on self-confidence, that would be helpful. Now, very often it's difficult to detect an obvious progress, but we can check whether the student is able to speak publicly, and also we can go into other details like self-organization. Now, if we can provide certain guidelines to help the schools to fill out the forms, so that there are objective standards for filling out taking the items, like satisfactory, very satisfactory. Kenneth Leung. Now I will focus on paragraphs 2.16 to 2.22. Now on information to be provided to parents when they choose SEN, choose the schools for the SEN children. Now, does every public primary school and secondary school in Hong Kong have SEN students in their school population? Yes. And there are now totally 45,000, so it's 1 in 10. So there is SEN child in every school.
長即係無論佢緊即係啲小朋友入小學啊入中學咧，佢所攞到嘅資訊咧，其實都會淨係。
So the schools have open days maybe, so they provide information there, and in the guidebooks for parents on schools. So this, any other ways to let the parents get more information? And does every school have an open day, Mr. Lai? I'm not certain on whether every school has an open day, but very often they have open day for parents, and very often the primary schools are also open to kindergarten parents, and for SEN parents we also organize seminars for them to provide information about primary schools. Now this is support for SEN parents, and we explain the difference between ordinary schools and special schools.
They can also visit the schools to get more information. These are the channels for parents to understand the school of their choice. So the website, open day, profiles of schools, and also seminars organized by the Bureau or the authority. So, Secretary, is the information sufficient provided to the parents of students with SEN? Do you think that you have provided them with sufficient information? I think that the preliminary information is always available. If parents want to gain some more in-depth understanding of the schools, they may need to talk to people in the school so that they know what can be done to support particular types of SEN students, because the information may not be easily accessible in some texts. Kenneth, parents of students with SEN can come under any one of the 9 categories. If you look at paragraph 2.18, for example, A, B, C, under paragraph 2.18, availability of accessible lifts, and the facility for wheelchair users, and also the general school approach, which is a very general indeed. So the information on individual schools is not detailed enough to understand whether particular kinds of SEN students will be well supported, because it's different. The needs may be very different for a student with autism and another with mental illness. So you're asking parents to ask the schools one by one. Isn't this a rather frustrating exercise? Well, conceptually, in principle, all schools have to take care of different kinds of SEN students. For those who are covered by the school place allocation system, they would have to enroll different SEN students, and they would have to find ways to enable the students, the SEN students, to learn in the best possible manner given the resources. We require such performance from the school. We require the school to give certain information. Of course, the more, the better, but there's a limit as to what can be provided in writing, and even if they can only do a limited job in certain aspects, it doesn't mean that they cannot improve. But if parents like to enroll their children to one of a few possible schools, and the parents may want to know the policies, the school's approach to cater for SEN students, so they need to ask the schools. So this is a disclosure by schools catering for SEN students. Do you have any rules for disclosure? The minimum that they have to do? Because if what you said is correct, some schools can refuse to disclose certain information, or they keep it to the minimum. If the parents care a lot about their children who have SEN needs, they may try to glean more information from the schools, but you just don't give any directives to schools on disclosure, on information to be disclosed. I don't know whether this is the right question to ask. Is there going to be a labeling effect if the school says we have 30, for example, 30 SEN students? Well, I don't think they should further provide breakdown figures, because there's the concern that the school will be labeled in a way. For example, if you talk about the percentage of teachers with special education training, but no detail on the training is provided. if you want to take care of a student with mental illness vis-a-vis a student with a physical disability, it's two completely different areas. But the teachers, according to you, had to teach all students. But in choosing a school for his child, a parent would certainly like to have a school with people experienced in catering for SEN students of a particular kind. So I hope the Education Bureau would at least require a certain minimum information to be disclosed, so the parents don't have to spend endless time to try to get the information they need. You know that there is a central allocation system and the other rounds. I think it's a very frustrating experience to have to go through all these in so many rounds, and I'm speaking as a parent with 2 children. I know that of course the sentiment is that if we keep it as simple as possible, it will be better. Let me ask my colleagues in a moment to explain what information should be provided. But things can change. A student with some specialized skills may resign the next year, or may go to work for another school. So it may lead to misunderstanding or the perception that that they have been misled. Of course, I know parents would like to know more, as much as possible, about the schools for their children. Mr. Lai will supplement. When we talk to parents of students with SEN, we try to take a step back and look at it objectively. Parents should understand the schools comprehensively, apart from support for SEN students, especially for primary schools, which is a system whereby students should go to the primary school close to the home. Every year, we would send a letter to the schools concerned, asking for information to be disclosed. We can see what more can be done. At present, all schools would have some teachers with special training, and also we want them to disclose information on barrier-free access. And in the profile, school profiles, will also ask them to provide other support measures, and also how they would nurture school environment or culture conducive to students of SEN. I don't think we are talking about just the profiles. Please provide more information in the website. For example, for physical disability, we have a visual impairment, hearing impairment, and speech and language impairment. They are all physical disabilities, which means that the student can be helped with certain equipment and devices. So when it comes to students with physical disability, what kind of facilities will be provided in the school? I don't think this will change from year to year. If, for example, you have a special language lab, I don't think it will be dismantled the following year. So I hope the schools would specify such information in the disclosure. I hope you can take this on board. Yes, for things mentioned by Mr. Leung, things that are not susceptible to frequent changes, certainly they can be covered. But the thing is, even if they don't have certain facilities now, it doesn't mean that they are not going to have them later. We understand the need to provide more information. It's important for the parents in making a choice. Perhaps we can look into this. For the parents of a student with SENS, they need special information in making their choice. Yes, the point's taken. 2 short questions, and then I would let Mr. Xiu ask his question. I want to know whether direct subsidy schools are required to enroll the student with SENS, and are they going to get the same subsidy as like other students? Yes, I've already asked some questions about DSS schools. Well, in principle, under the law, there's no discrimination is allowed on the ground of disability. So the school should not turn away students just because they are students with SEN. I understand that many DSS schools have admitted students with SEN. As for the subsidy, it's not done in accordance with the number of students. The subsidy will be calculated by the per capita subsidy under various heads of expenditure. I don't know whether you have a list, and I don't know whether the list of schools doing this will be sensitive. Maybe we don't need the names. In our previous reports, we didn't include names of schools, for example. I'm speaking from memory. I don't think we have asked DSS schools on the number of on the number of students with SENS that they have admitted. But it's against the Disability Discrimination Ordinance not to accept them. Yes, if that's correct. If we receive a complaint, we will take action. Are there many complaints, or are they admitting a lot of students with SENS? The number of students admitted won't form the basis of an offense under the DDO. We are on part 2, but you can go back to part 1 if you want. 1.6, table 2, paragraph 1.6, table 2. There are 8 learning difficulties, specific learning difficulties, ADHD, autism. And there's one more. Mental illness. What is it? A mental illness left out? Well, the question has been asked and answered. In 2017, 2018, they included mental illness. Yes, that's in 2017-18. So that's not in the table covering 2016-17. How many students with SENS under this category? My colleagues are still working out the statistics. We have received applications. Please provide the figures later. So with the 9 kinds, which department decided that these 9 categories are learning and adjustment difficulties? We have in Hong Kong we have a rehabilitation plan in which you will see the disabilities that we can find in Hong Kong. Is that decided by the Education Bureau? No. The rehabilitation portfolio is under the Labour and Welfare Bureau. The last plan was devised in 2005. So LWB is also doing something for ADHD. Well, the rehabilitation of division look at disabilities, and not just for the education but for healthcare. And we list all these difficulties and regard the students with these difficulties as a student with SEND. So it's something under the LWB, and it's about education. They have a rehabilitation advisory committee. Mr. Lai, I asked this question for a reason. Members have asked very detailed questions, but I have a question about the general principle. One in 10 students in Hong Kong has some special educational need. 7%. I heard it was 1 in 10. 42,890 students were sent in 2016-17. I'm shocked.
跟住我想同大家講講啦，即係如果你話嗰個朋友，即係嗰個小朋友，佢係有視障嘅。
If a student is visually impaired or physical disability, of course, he has to be helped, and the same for hearing impairment or intellectual disability. And then we have speech and language impairment, autism, ADHD, and specific learning difficulties. Not counting mental illness, we have 8 categories. I agree that we should help the first 4 categories. Physical disability, visual impairment, hearing impairment, and intellectual disability.
There are about 2,640 such students. For the entire group, 42,800 people. So 2016-17, 42,890 SEN students. 2,640 suffer from visual impairment, hearing impairment. So the remaining 40,000 students suffer from ADHD, specific learning difficulties, autism, speech impairment. I come back specially to talk about this because I would like to talk about principle. How do you identify these cases? When I was little, people said that I suffer from hyperactivity, but I was a kid, and that's why I would be everywhere. I would climb here and climb there. That's why you're a legislator. And when I was primary school, I found that some students did not speak, and they were actually left at home by themselves, and teachers said that they are autistic. But now, well, when they interacted with people, they became normal. Well, I was always called that I was hyperactive. But at that time, it wasn't called hyperactive. It was just the case that I was naughty. But nowadays, I hear a lot of labels: autistic, ADHD, But these students, I found that they are just normal children, running everywhere, laughing. But you said that they are autistic, but they all go to university. So how do you label them to say that they suffer from problems?
劉博士講一講，因為佢係專家啦，即係睇下即係究竟即係。
I'll defer to Mr. Lai. Before you explain, well, SEN students are about special educational needs to help them get back to mainstream. You will explain in this way and then you explain other things. Well, there are 2 teachers making the assessment, and then there is a psychologist. And then there's a report, is that right? I have read it. Can you tell me how teachers say that someone's suffering from ADHD? Well, it's not the teacher who said that. In the exchange between teachers and students, the teachers may notice behavior that is different from others. The next step is to refer the case to educational psychologists. For some cases, it may be related to the family. The educational psychologist can rule out those cases. Those remain will be related to the child's development. We do this not to label anyone. Some students are born with these difficulties. It's not the case that parents can do better to teach them, but you need to give them more help. Autistic children cannot understand instructions. They live in their own world. There may be problems created by family problems. Say, for example, children that are not cared for or attended, and they just sit in front of a computer. When it comes to SEN assistance, we mean outside normal classes, these students need more resources so that they can do better. That's what we aim to achieve. Will we have time to defer to Dr. Lau? Yes. A lot of people are listening to the meeting, so it will be better for you to explain more. There is a diagnostic criteria to diagnose whether the kid suffers from special needs. Say, for example, ADHD. Students with the problem will encounter difficulties on 3 areas: impulsivity, hyperactivity, as well as deficiency in attention. Then if it is someone who is inattentive, then it's an inattentive type. If it is more hyperactive, then it's a hyperactivity type. We also look at the implication of the difficulties. There should be at least manifestation in 2 settings that affects the person's daily functioning. Say, for example, social skills, interaction with families, and learning difficulties. 3, that should be onset before a certain age. There is a manual. It is an international and American manual. In the past, children will have to manifest such problems before the age of 7. That's DSM-4. But now we have DSM-5. That should be onset before the age of 12. Diagnostic criteria changes with the times. In short, we don't just look at the kid to see if it's non-stop, naughty. There are concrete criteria to decide whether a child is suffering from certain illnesses. So the two standards, when they reissued, DSM-5 is 2016 or 2017. 2016? Yes. It's recent? Yes. It is new? Yes. What was the last one? DSM-4, I have to check, maybe a few years ago. Usually there's a review once every 7 or 8 years. So the latest one is 2016. So roughly that time. 2016 or 17. So it's new. Well, technology is different. We were quite nerdy. Nowadays, children have a lot of access to information and they think differently. I don't think that 1 out of 10 children in Hong Kong has a problem. What is going on? Special education. Don't say that there is no labeling effect. My relatives are quite embarrassed about it. And then at the end, well, the child suffers a problem, and then they were said to be of special educational needs. In the past, it was like physical disability or intellectual disability, we understand. But now ADHD, I see such cases everywhere, and I've seen some children were non-stop and they do quite well. Autistic. Shy people are autistic. I was shy. You could say that I was autistic. People are affected by what happens around them, and it changes their lives. That goes for family as well. If you classify them into certain groups, it will have far-reaching implication to their lives. I hear a lot that someone's autistic, someone else is a little girl suffering from ADHD, but the girl is just running around in a restaurant. Now the girl is in university. There is no problem. Well, I started at 5:45. The meeting started at 2:30. Members have asked a detailed question. I only have a question about the core problem. How do you determine these cases? You now say that 10% of children in Hong Kong require special education. How do you find that figure? 42,800. Well, those are suffering from hearing, visual, physical ability, just 2,000. Well, with speech therapy, I was slurring when I was a kid. Autistic, ADHD. What do you mean by special learning disability? 20,000 people. They have normal intellectual ability, but maybe they don't do well with their dictations or their writing. And their academic performance. If they don't revise, of course, they don't have good academic performance.
嗱，即係陳淑莊議員嗱，我問下呢點解陳淑莊議員咧，即係我同事講。
Well, Ms. Chen said that I should not pretend to be an expert. I'm not an expert, But I don't think that 10% of Hong Kong people suffer from such difficulties. Can you explain to me, for the first 4 groups, how did you identify those people? How do you label them? When it comes to integrated education or special educational needs, there are always differences. There is a normal distribution in a population. There will be those who are smarter than others. There are also people who are not as smart. For special educational needs, we're talking about a group of students who have a lower learning ability. We don't say that they are not going to be successful. It's just that certain of their abilities are deficient, and we give them more assistance so that they will adjust better and learn better, so that in the future there will be more options open to them. That is what we aim to achieve under integrated education. We don't want to label them, that once you label this, you carry this label for the rest of your life. If we can help those with special educational needs, if they can overcome the difficulties, they will do quite well. Special learning difficulties may be someone suffering from dyslexia. When they look at the character, they look at it the wrong way round. So they write the word the wrong way round, and you say that they have written it wrong. It's just that when they perceive that character, they perceive it in the wrong way round. Mr. Shiu. To give more resources to students, that is logical, and I agree with that. But you group these students in one single group? I don't agree. Mr. Shield, we understand your views. Then I have the second question. A lot of people are watching. I'll give you time. The secretary has the duty to explain to you. There is this report, but it doesn't say that there are only 9 groups of people. They just want to get more resources to help students to learn better. That is the goal. It's not about naughty students. SEN is not about students with problems. It's to help them to learn. Your view is right. Yes, 1 student out of 10 will have problem. Everyone has problems. We are an affluent society. We are talking about to help them. Integrated education is integration, a normal environment for them to grow up in. There are experts to give students a chance to learn nowadays. Your view is right, and that was the view at that time. We are on a path. We share resources to have an even learning opportunity. That was the goal. You can continue with your question. I have outlined 4 groups. You identify them. You say that they are special learning difficulties, ADHD, autistic, and speech impairment. You will give them resources. You help them You say that you will no longer be SEN. How many years will it take? How many % of these people will no longer be SEN? When it comes to education, especially special education, it is very difficult for us to quantify it. Well, as Mr. Shiu said that he knows of some autistic children who eventually go to university. But going to university is not a factor whether you say someone is successful or not. You have to give students opportunities to learn. There may be other problems, and as a result, the student will not one day no longer be SEN student. Do we have to set a goal to say that, well, when we take them out of the SEN group, then we are successful? No. We continue to give them resources so that they will find it easier to learn and to interact with others. We have learned from parents of autistic children that they found it easier to communicate with them. Autistic children will not listen to you, but if you get them to listen to you and to communicate with you, that itself is an improvement. Now, don't get bogged down on this point. The meeting is finishing soon. What other questions do you have? That was only my preamble. If they think that 10% of Hong Kong people suffer from such difficulties, if resources are put in, when will they be cured? And how long will it take? And now they say that there is no such figure. That means there will be more and more people with these problems. I really don't agree that there are so many children in Hong Kong suffering from these problems. I think you have wrongly labeled them. A lot of them are not such case. This report is not to label the 42,000 students. As I explained to you, Mr. Shield, this is about helping them, helping students with learning difficulties. It is not a bad thing. That's what education is about. To give students more opportunities. Yes, I agree that there should be more support given to students. I have been harping on about the same point because 42,000 out of 42,000 people, 40,000 people belong to those four groups. If you have not included those four groups, then a number of SEN is not as high. Chairman, may I just be quick? Don't get bogged down on this point. Tanya. Before we finish, I would like to ask a number of questions. It's not to express my opinion. I will do so when we have a panel meeting.
Now, members may not agree with the report. In the PAC, we need to look at the facts. The Public Accounts Committee asked questions about the report. We understand your opinion. We can agree with their answers and on what they do regarding the recommendations. What I ask is all from the report. You have asked 26 minutes. Now I ask questions Mr. Xu, you were here at 2:30. As chairman, I let you ask questions. The meeting is supposed to end at 6. Now, this part is supposed to end at 6. Now, Tanya, you can ask, and you can ask next time. Now we were on paragraph 2.12. Now we can continue next time. Now on the detailed assessment report will only be provided to the school. The school will get a copy, but not the parents. Yes? Will the parents get a chance to read the detailed report? Now the summary already covers the information most suitable for the parents, that is the diagnosis and the measures to be taken. And the detailed assessment report is in English, is for communications between the school and the experts, and if necessary we can provide more information to parents. Now I'd like to get some basic information. It touches upon chapter 3. Now we were talking about the operation guide. I'd like to get a copy. It is here. Yes, I see it. Thank you. Now, students at a later stage, they will be provided certain services. They will be at levels 1, 2, and 3. Now, after they see the educational psychologist, will the report state what level of service they will be suitable for? Now, this is not in the report. Now, this depends on the performance after receiving support. Who will decide the level of service to be received? Now, there will be a student support team in the school. There will be a coordinating officer in the schools, and sometimes it may be the curriculum master. Sometimes there may be the counseling teacher, and this also depends on the capability of the teaching team. They will jointly decide what level of support will be provided. Now, perhaps this can be left till next time, because I believe Mr. Shill will also have questions for next time. I couldn't attend previously. Now, I do not want to be critical, but I have to exercise my duties as a chairman. Now, sometimes it's opinions being expressed, and we do not want to depart from the report. Now, I will be interested on how money is spent, but the core question is, maybe there isn't that number of children requiring the service. Now it's over 40,000 of them. Mr. Xu, we try to identify the facts. We can have our own opinions, but I hope that we want to cover the perspectives on integrated education. Thank you.